Okay, let's drop that music down. You guys will let me know if that's too loud, too quiet. Okay. And there we go. Welcome everyone to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to be making another artwork by another one of my very favorite creators, favorite artists of all time. This time it's Bob Kane, the co-creator of Batman. And let me just show you a few things right off the top here. What do I want to show you? This is the image that we are going to create together. We're going to make a painting of it. And if you want to do as close a version to the original, then what I've already done for you is I've done a tracing of it, an outline, which you can then print out, and we're going to transfer this onto a canvas. And depending on the size of canvas, you could use a gigantic canvas if you have a printer, or you could tile it and make a really big poster, or you could make a smaller version of it by just reducing it on the photocopier or your printer. I'm going to be painting on a 9x12 sized canvas board, right? I've grown to love these canvas boards. I used to hate these. I used to think these were just for like rank amateurs, and now I see the wisdom of having these things because they save a lot of space. And I've got a link in the description below for a pretty good version. These ones, they're an extra. They're about $2 on Amazon when you buy like 40 of them or 30 of them or something at a time. And they are definitely higher quality than the $1 versions you get at the dollar store. Anyway, so we're going to transfer that painting onto the canvas here. Let's just take a quick little look at a few things, because I know this video has the potentially to be a little bit controversial, so we'll talk about that in a second. If you want to find out how do you download this outline that I've got here, well, in the description below you'll see a Dropbox link, and if you click on the Dropbox link, you'll see all these different artists. These are all paintings. If you want to do a Salvador Dali painting, or a Leonardo da Vinci painting, or a Soba Singh painting, they're all here. Next, on Tuesday, we're going to do a Star Wars painting by one of the guys who helped really create the look of Star Wars, Ralph McQuarrie. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about Bob Kane. And if we look in here, you'll see some different files. We've got 4 files in here. Usually we only have 3. We'll talk about what that is in a second. But, so in there, you're going to have 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG and one's a PDF file. Ostensibly the exact same thing, just sometimes different printers would prefer to have a PDF. You'll see the original image. I will say, if you're thinking this looks a little bit odd, the actual original image, because this is from inside Detective Comics number 27, the original panel is something like this. That's pretty close to what the original looked like. So to make it fit on a larger canvas, I have included this stuff above and below that wasn't there, but it's based on my own invention, as well as I've included this image here. This is a sketch or drawing that Bob Kane did. If you've ever been to a comic book convention, I'm a huge comic book fan. I used to go to these comic conventions all the time, and usually there's some really great comic artists that are there in person, and if you pay them, depending on how famous they are, $5 or $100, they'll do an original sketch for you. So I'm not exactly sure the origin of this, but anyway, this is a drawing by Bob Kane of the exact same posture, because this is a fairly well reproduced image, so he probably would have been asked to draw it many times over when he did public appearances. There's also a link to a private Facebook group just for people that are probably watching right now. Although there are hundreds of people that watch that don't join the group for whatever reason. But I think this is such a cool thing. I'm just constantly blown away. Every day I get a little notification and I pop in. And what's cool is you don't just see the stuff that I'm working on or that I'm for the class, but we see here like Sharon's flowers that she's been painting. A lot of fantastic flowers lately. Here, I'm going to give that a love. I love it. And here's Gail's version of the Trilux Sing painting we did just on Tuesday. Look how cool that is. Right? I'm super, super honored. And the comment, like I just responded here briefly, Gail, you wrote something really generous here. You are on my list of people to be grateful for. You've changed my life. That's so sweet. I don't even know how to respond to that. It's so amazing. So I just wrote back saying, having great people like you out there who have been following along religiously for months after months, painting everything, and being active here on the Facebook group. I don't know what I would have done over the past year if it wasn't for such great support from this community that we've created here. So let's move on here. So today the image we're creating, as I said, was a panel that was inside. You can see here's the bottom little bit of it here. This is a panel that was inside Detective Comics number 27, and that's the very first appearance of Batman. And as I'm just scrolling down here trying to see if there's anything different, but this is the cover of Batman number 27. I was even considering painting the cover of Batman. Maybe the reason why I decided against it is I was like, do we want to include all of the text on there? I think for some people, doing all this fine line work can be a little bit tricky and maybe a little exhausting for beginner and intermediate artists. And while it would be great to practice those techniques, I think many of you might appreciate exploring that kind of thing on your own. Anyway, so there's Detective Comics number 27. I thought we'd just take a quick little look here. Here's Bob Kane. Bob Kane, if we look at his Wikipedia page, born in New York City, 1915, lived a long life, died just before the millennium there, at age 83. So he saw the entire transformation of Batman from just being, a throwaway character in Detective Comics was just, back in the 1930s, late 1930s, there was, these comic books existed, but they were just usually random things. Every week would be a different character, different story, different bad guy. And it wasn't until Superman came along in Action Comics, just, I think, about a year before Batman, or things happened pretty quickly. Batman, or Superman, was an instant, huge success. And a whole bunch of people looked around and said, how do we do more of that? How do we make more of this, right? And Bob Kane, well, I should say, the reason why I say today's episode could be controversial is Bob Kane was a bit of an egomaniac, and there is a lot of dispute as to what his role in the actual creation of Batman and the Joker and Riddler and the Penguin and Catwoman and all these other, the Robin, all these other characters that that are a part of the Batman universe. There's a lot of controversy as to who created them, who played what role in that. Bob Kane, for his entire life, really, and even till today, is really seen as the creator of Batman and Robin and Joker, etc. But there is another, if we actually look at the original drawings that Bob Kane did of Batman, this is what the original Batman looked like. It was this guy in a red suit with this little tiny, what do you call that? An eye mask, and these wings. And he modeled this character, or these wings, after Leonardo da Vinci's flying wing inventions, or sketches anyway. And also Zorro. We can see the Zorro mask on there. And he, and then another silent, well, it was a book adapted into silent film called The Bat, starring, is it Jack? I think it was Jack Pickford? Mary Pickford's younger brother. And it wasn't until, and so this was Bob Kane's original idea, until he met with a friend of his and a collaborator on a previous project, Bill Finger. And Bill Finger, to many people these days, is actually credited with having done a lot of the work that Bob Kane took sole credit for. And Bob Kane is generally considered to be the person that suggested to Bob Kane to make the costume black or blue, or at least darker, not red, to have a full face mask rather than just a little eye mask, that is credited with coming up with Bruce Wayne, Batman's alter ego, and the city of Gotham City, where the whole Batman stories take place. And so we'll just take a quick little look. If you're really interested in diving down this rabbit hole, there's plenty of stuff to keep you busy. So there's a lot of stuff on the screen right now, but this, there was a documentary that was on Hulu, which is an American streaming service, called Batman and Bill being Bill Finger, that really talks about the origin of Batman and Bill Finger's role in that. So here we see, like, did Bob Kane steal Batman from Bill Finger? And you can find there's lots of the complicated legacy of Batman co-creator Bob Kane. You know, there's people saying, should we, you know, rewrite the legacy of Bob Kane? You know, there is some really interesting interviews with Bob Kane that were produced in the 80s, actually being interviewed by Stan Lee, which is kind of, you know, clashing of worlds. Stan Lee is acknowledged as the guy that he is the co-creator of pretty much the entire Marvel universe, including Spider-Man, X-Men, the Hulk, Daredevil, Captain America, all of those characters, Iron Man, all those things. Stan Lee was the writer behind all of those original stories, and he collaborated with a whole bunch of different artists. And the two of them talk back and forth. I'm not going to play any of that footage, but if you really want to see a pretty interesting conversation and get an idea who Bob Kane was, and really start making up your own mind as to his role in the creation of Batman. He was very protective and was always quick to take credit for Batman. And anyway, let's get started here, because I've got some painting to do, and we can chat while paint is drying, right? So, but I think this is a fascinating story. So, here's the printout. As I said, you can find this on the Dropbox, and I've printed it on, you can use any kind of printer paper, it doesn't matter. I've got, as I said, a 9x12 sized canvas. You could do 8x10, 8.5 by 11, or anything like that. I'm going to use, this is 220 grit sandpaper, which I've just stapled to a block 2x4 remnant. So what I'm doing there is every month or so, what I do is I get a whole bunch of these canvas boards out. I unwrap them because they often come in their own plastic, and I apply some white acrylic gesso onto the surface, and then I let it dry. And then, like what you just saw me doing, you don't have to do it. You want to wait for it to dry, probably overnight, and then I sand it down, and this helps get me a nice smooth surface. You can see when I wipe it away how much of this powder comes off. So ideally you'd want to wipe all of this sand, sawdust, or whatever you would call it. Not sand or sawdust. It's technically like gesso powder or plaster powder, really, is what's in there. Anyway, that just helps me get a nice smooth surface. So if we're doing any detailed work, the smoother the surface, the easier that whole process becomes. So in the chat there, I asked, what is your favorite version of Batman? Some people might have a great affinity for the 1960s live action one with Adam West starring Batman. And who is Robin? Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy. Adam, and that was the silly kind of fun one that actually had a huge impact culturally. I think really helped, as silly as it was, and I bet you Bob Kane was not a fan of that. I bet you he was not happy with that version because of how silly it was. But I think it really helped make comic books like very mainstream. Like, it was a cultural phenomenon. It was a big television hit. Okay, so here's some carbon paper. I'm going to take some carbon paper. You can get graphite paper. You can usually buy this stuff at art supply stores or fabric stores, because people will use graphite or carbon paper to transfer patterns onto clothing. And you can see I just put it underneath here once I've got it centered. And then I just find a colored pencil. You could use any color, really. I've been using a lot of red lately, mostly just because it shows up well on camera here. Maybe, let's see. I haven't used, it doesn't matter what color you use. You could just use a regular carbon or graphite pencil. And I'm just going to go over these these outlines that I've drawn here. So, once you can see that it transfers right on top there. It's like magic. It makes it so much easier than spending hours trying to sketch all this out onto a canvas. I've already done all the hard work for you. I've done another dozen or so outlines for the next probably 8 episodes. There's a few episodes where I'm actually doing multiple outlines for, just to give people some options. But that's what I've been up to the past week, is doing all of these outlines for a whole bunch of upcoming videos. I'm really excited. In this May, I'm calling May Masters May, and we are focusing almost entirely on artists from China and Japan, because it is also Asian History Month. So it's sort of a good opportunity for us to really dive into all the incredible artwork from that side of the world. Artwork that is not as well known over here as it really should be. We'll look at some names that are, about as close as you can get to living legends in China and Japan, that probably most people here in Canada and the United States have never heard of before. I think when we paint some of those paintings, you will understand why they are, like, hands down absolute masters of their craft. And So anyway, we're going to be spending all of May looking at the art of Asia, and so I'm taking a little bit of a break from the Paint the News series that I'm still going to be doing more of. It's one of those. It's really because as I started really thinking about, okay, which artist should we do? So if we have like, let's say one for for May being Asian History Month, which like 4 artists should we paint? And then it's like, whoa, 4 people as a kind of introduction to the incredible art from China and Japan. Like, it just felt like setting myself up for failure, because there's so much there that I love and want to share with people, that I quickly threw my hands up and said, well, let's just do the whole month. We'll just devote to that. Okay, so you know, some of these other extra lines are maybe less important. Even this little kind of circle, that's not in the original, but it is in his sketch that he did, and I did think it was kind of neat. And I thought, well, maybe we should keep that there. And then all these lines, this kind of texture on the, I don't know what this is, bricks or something. So I'm going to draw, the way that I would approach this is I would just sort of draw all of the horizontal lines. And then when I've got that done, I will do all of the diagonal or somewhat vertical lines, right? Now we're going to paint over virtually everything here, so I wouldn't be too precious at all. And depending on how your picture's turning out, you might decide to omit some of this. You could paint this in an entirely different color. Like all of this stuff up there, I'm not even sure how I want to approach that. We can talk about all the different ways that one could approach it. And here's Bob Kane's signature here. I could see somebody replacing this with Bill Finger. Like in that interview with Stan Lee, he's making. It's what's interesting is he's drawing while Stan Lee's sitting next to him, and he's telling stories. And when he gets to his own signature, he's like, and you don't want to forget the famous signature, Bob Kane. Bob Kane's, you know, he himself says that, which is, you know, it might give you a little bit of an idea. And you might say, oh, he was just kidding. Well, I don't know. Watch the video yourself. Having said all of what we've been talking about with Bob Kane, he was clearly a creative force. Despite all the controversy, he still played. Without him, it's debatable how far Batman would have actually gone. Anyway. So now we've got our drawing transferred on the canvas. You know, up to you how you want to use this. I've been keeping them with the idea that they could be really fun for our daughter to color on, who's 20 months old. And so a little bit of, you know, she's always scribbling on things, but it would be cool if she just scribbled on something where I've already drawn on it, right? Okay, I see. Deborah says, my favorite Batman was the first, the Tim Burton movie from 1989 with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. I remember, I don't know how old I was at the time. How old would I have been? About 12 or something? 10? You can tell I'm a little bit older and things start getting a little murky when I start going back in the past. I was a complete fanboy, a comic book fanboy back there, and I got caught up in the Batman. If you were alive back then, Batman was everywhere. You know, that was the age where there was like 12 stations on your television, and every single one of them had Batman ads, not only just for the movie, but for cartoons and all that stuff airing constantly. McDonald's, Happy Meals stuff, all that kind of stuff going on. Anyway, so let's get our paints out here. I see also in the chat, Christine Glick says, the animated series, Batman, the animated series. I love the Batman animated series. From 1992. Was it 92? Gosh, it feels like I'm getting old. I feel like that was just a few years ago that came out. But yeah, I guess it was. My goodness. What's interesting about the Batman animated series is that, you know, and the Joker was voiced by Mark Hamill. Do you remember who Mark Hamill is? Luke Skywalker. So that's just kind of, that's an interesting thing. Mark Hamill, who was, you know, Luke Skywalker was the, you know, archetypal hero, good guy, and it was kind of, it's funny for him to have taken on the role of the Joker. Okay, so let's put some paint on our palette here. Let me see if I'm going to squeeze out the rest of this paint. I imagine there's probably going to be a bunch of new people who've never seen me or never seen this channel or how I paint. So welcome, those of you that are new. If you want to know why or why I'm using these colors and why these 6 and not 8 or 4 or whatever, I did a whole 45 long episode series of how to paint. It's all in the description below if you want it. It's all free. It's all here on YouTube. Many of the people that are watching right now took the course and have gone on to make really incredible work from it and are watching today. But anyway, I'm using these 6 colors, 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. And there's a warm and a red yellow, a warm and a red blue, and a warm and a red there is a warm and a cool yellow, warm and cool yellow, warm and cool red, and warm and cool blue. That's what happens when I'm trying to squeeze red paint out of the tube and talk about blue, you know, there. So, now, it is interesting to make a painting of a comic book, because, you know, if we look at this original image, it's a pretty simple, straightforward image. I mean, if we count how many colors do we actually see here, we have black that is used for obviously the cape, but also for all the outlining. We see this kind of dark, well, not even, it's kind of like a baby blue inside the cape, and then also in the sky here. And then we have a much lighter powder blue that is in behind. Then so that's what we got, black, 2 blues, we've got a yellow in the sun, or moon. I think it's supposed to be the moon. And then the ground here. And we've got a little bit brighter yellow that's probably right out of the tube on the belt. So that's 5. We've got 6 for these kind of purple gloves, and 7 for this Caucasian tone here. And I would say the only white that I see might be the eyes of Batman. So 7, or if you consider the white to be a color, if you're painting on a white canvas, you could just leave that bare, but you'll see how I approach this. So you could potentially go and paint with a very, very limited palette with literally just 7 colors. Or if you wanted to be a little more experimental, you could add more colors. You could do some blending with this painting. There's a lot of different ways to go. I think I'm going to keep it relatively simple, and then invite anybody else to take some creative liberties as they go. So, which makes it kind of interesting. How do we want to approach this painting? Again, if we think about like the printing process, printers are printing onto paper, and the color of the paper is generally what white is, right? Generally in comic books, they weren't printing like white ink onto the paper. So when I said like the eyes are white, that would probably be the color of the paper itself. And everything else would have a color on top of that. So that begs the question, what we've normally been doing for all of our previous, well, not all, but maybe 85% of our previous paintings is applying a color on the painting to begin with, and then painting other colors on top of that. And usually the color that we apply first is a warm, earthy yellow or kind of orange, right? And traditionally that's what artists have used for the past like 500 years when they're painting on panels. And some of that because they're stretching canvas over top of a panel, and that canvas itself had that kind of orangey, off-colored white kind of color. And sometimes it was because the artists were painting directly onto wood panels, and therefore it would, the color of wood, the wood there's lots of different kinds of wood. I used to be a carpenter myself. I survived for 10 years in Los Angeles as a carpenter. And so I'm obviously aware that there's darker woods and lighter woods. But often if artists were painting directly onto a lighter wood, let's say like pine or something, they might just leave it plain like that and use that as the under color that they would paint on. Anyway, I'm just sort of, as I'm talking, I'm also thinking, you know what, we could do something a little bit different, which instead of what we've been doing for a while is painting the warm yellow as our first color over top of the surface. I'm going to suggest we paint a kind of off-white, what is often called like an unbleached titanium white, or kind of like an eggshell white. So what I'm gonna mix that color. In fact, let me see if it actually would look a lot like this color. So let's actually, since it's right here, let's try to mix this color we see on the screen. We'll apply that as our underpainting, our first layers. How on earth would we get that color? Good question. Well, what it looks like is, if you kind of think of it as a bit of like a skin tone, like a Caucasian skin tone. So the way to get that Caucasian skin tone, or really we're going to mix a brown, and then you can just add as much white in there as you want. So to mix that color, I'm just going to take a bunch of yellow, my warm yellow. I'm going to take some warm red, and we mix this together and we get an orange, right? Now, orange is fine. If we add white to this, it's going to go peach, which would be pretty close to what we see here, but I think we just want to add a little bit of blue. And you can see I take a big scoop, and then I put a bit of it to the side and only mix what I need into here. And then we've got a kind of a, right now, a very orangey brown. Okay. Maybe put a little bit more yellow in there. Okay, the more blue we put in here, the darker brown we're going to get. So this is great. I'm going to actually now scoop a bunch of white out. And let's start adding white into this color here. So you can see right now we've got kind of that, a very fleshy color. Kind of, this looks like the kind of color you might want to put on someone's blushing cheeks, potentially, right? I'm going to put a little bit more yellow in here. That's pretty good, but I think we need a lot more white in there because we don't want it to look like skin. We want it to look like newsprint. And so we're going to add a lot more white and more yellow in there. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to take this color now and I'm going to paint it over top of the surface. Actually, I'm just going to put a little bit of water in here. And as I say, this is really the only time I ever put water in my paintings. And I'm just doing that because I want to thin it out a little bit so that I can see my pencil lines that I've taken all that time to draw. I'm going to put a little bit more water in here because we've got a lot of white in here, right? And we know that white is really great for covering up mistakes, right? So if we paint that white directly on there, it might be a little bit tricky to see what was underneath here. So that's why I add a little bit of water. The white will also, or the water will also maybe help the drawing process speed up a little bit. So this is a little bit, maybe a little bit more flesh colored than I wanted. I'd probably go for adding a lot more white in here if I was to do this again, but sometimes you don't know until you do it. And you know, we could have done a little test, but we're going to paint over almost the whole canvas anyway, so I'm not super concerned about what this actual color looks like. If we were going to leave a lot of the canvas exposed, like or this color exposed, then I'd probably be more focused on nailing this color. But since, as I said, I'm not going to do that. That gives us, you know, it's a kind of a good place to start. The other thing that happens when we paint that paint onto the surface, it kind of traps those pencil lines underneath there. So now they're protected from subsequent layers of paint. When I'm applying this surface, I kind of put it on as quickly as possible, and I try not to do much scrubbing or extra painting. Otherwise, I could end up literally erasing my pencil lines. So lots of things here in the chat. Joshua says, my favorite comic book is probably Iron Man. Yes, Iron Man. You know, it's interesting. Iron Man was kind of seen as a secondary Marvel character for a long time, and it wasn't until the Marvel movies like came out, and did Iron Man first appear in the Iron Man movie? To be honest, I have no idea. But that movie kind of elevated Iron Man from being like a second tier character to arguably one of the most well-known superheroes around, because of the Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in that movie. I would also say that also gave a whole new generation of actors permission to be in superhero movies, because I think there's still to this day people who look down their noses at comic books as being just for children or young geeky guys or something. But considering comic books are an industry that brings in billions of dollars a year, not just in comics, but in the movies and television shows and all that kind of stuff. It's nothing to laugh at. Okay. So, what else do I see? Deborah says, Michael, you would have been around 10 because you were close to my son's age. Okay, there you go. You see, you know me better than I do myself. Deborah says, we bought Joel the Batmobile and saved it for our grandson. That's cool. I bet you some of those toys probably, especially like the Batmobile, probably has a bit of value to it. Okay, I'm going to blow dry this here. So you can see putting a little bit of that water in there thins the paint out, which makes it dry much faster. So you'll see later on when we're painting, I could be sitting there blow drying for a minute and still things are a little bit tacky. That took, what, 10 seconds and the thing is bone dry, right? So that's great for my underpainting layer. It's nice and dry, nice and quick. You can see it's not even, it's a little bit patchy. Doesn't bother me the slightest. I could care less. Again, if, you know, like, so for instance, I might just leave his face alone, right? If I want to use, you know, if I want him to use the same skin tone, I can just leave, I don't even have to paint his chin at all. I can just leave it like that. I might actually put white for the eyes. Anyway, so that's the painting. Again, I probably could have added a lot more white in here to get it a little bit closer to the image over on my left here, but so what would be the next step? Well, I suppose if we're thinking about like the comic book process, you know, you have your paper. And then the way that comic books are printed is usually in like a 4-color printing process, as we call like CMYK. And I always forget the I'm going to look like a fool because I do so much printing. CMYK is cyan for blue, magenta for the red. So we can actually see, if I actually go back here, CMYK would be cyan, which is your cool blue. magenta, which is your cool red, Y for yellow, and it tends to be a bit more of a cooler yellow as well. So you really actually have a lot of cool colors in the printing process. And then your K is black, but I'm trying to remember why they call it K. What is K? Anyway, so I'm sure somebody knows. But so anyway, you would print 3 layers of those colors, and to get those extra colors, let's say like the purple, you're actually layering the blue and the red together, and they're optically mixing to create purple, right? And yellow and blue to create green, etc., right? And then the final layer is your black that comes over top of everything and really pulls the picture together. So I think maybe let's try to paint it almost like the printing process. So if we were printing it like the printing process, probably what you would also do is begin with some of your lighter colors and then apply darker colors over top of it, the last one being your black. So how about, why don't we paint our yellow next? So I wonder if we paint, we may end up losing some of these lines down here with, because what I'm thinking about doing on the bottom down here is mixing the yellow with white. But if I paint that over here, we're going to lose a lot of these details, which, if we don't want to lose details, one thing we could do is just quickly redraw some of these lines. So I'm going to do that really quickly. I might leave this here as signature alone. And this little halo. I don't know what I want to put in here. I might put more, I guess this is, depending on, like, if we, his sketch, you know, this is just like a circle, so I don't know if, is that a highlight or is that a shadow? I think we'll make it a shadow, as I'm, you know, so, or you could omit it entirely as well. All right, so, okay. Now, they have a bit of a cooler yellow. I'm going to suggest we put a bit of a warmer yellow down here with white. So, I'm going to put that, so let's put this right up front. The reason why I'm going to put a warmer yellow in the foreground is that warmer colors tend to come forward and cooler colors recede. We do have a fairly warm underpainting, so it wouldn't hurt to put cool yellow underneath here or down here, because it will be warmed up by the background. But, you know, anyway, so I'm going to take this cool yellow. Let's take our white and just mix these together. Decide how white do we want to make this. I don't know. Sometimes the only way to tell is by just going and painting. Now, don't worry about being perfect, because all of this is all just going to be black. We're going to paint black right over top of it. Now you can see why it was helpful for me to, I'm just going to paint right over there. It was helpful for me to redraw those pencil lines because there's a lot of white in this paint, which is really covering up all my pencil lines. You could have just, you could even have used this color as your foundational color for this painting, and it would have worked pretty darn well. So it would be nice if this color was relatively even. But even if it's not, because we're going to paint all those black lines over top of everything afterwards, you'll be surprised at how it pulls everything together and everything will look, you know, quote unquote right with once those black lines go over top of everything we paint here. So even if you have a little bit of patchiness, you could paint a second layer of this yellow over top. Just again, you might lose these pencil lines. Like you could again redraw your pencil lines a third time on top of here. I mean, maybe we should do that. I don't know. You know what? In fact, I think I'm going to put another layer of yellow, and I'm going to really quickly draw these lines again. I've never done this on the show before, but I think it just might be kind of instructive for people to see, you know, before you, like if you wanted to do another layer and you're like, oh no, but how am I going to be able to see things? Right, a little bit of, you know, it takes a little bit of extra time, but considering it's going to help me make this painting a little bit easier. And I wouldn't be, you know, again, this bottom half of the painting is something that I've completely created, right? So, however you interpret this image in these lines is just perfect. Okay, so let's paint some more yellow over top of that, and that's gonna brighten this up significantly. A little bit of extra water in there to get that even a little bit thinner. Let's do this one more time. The only thing I would say is, as you're doing this, you want to try to avoid like big areas of texture, right? So it doesn't matter, like I could paint yellow right in here, it doesn't matter, because that's all going to be black eventually, right? I just don't want to let it dry with a big gob of paint sitting there, because then when I do paint over top of it, I will see that weird gob of texture coming through, so... So now it's a little bit more solid of a color, not as patchy as before, and I think that's going to just look a little bit nicer at the end. And you see, you know, I've covered up little parts, feet, and all that stuff a bit. When I go back and add the black over top of that, I have a lot of leeway as to how I want to do that area. A little bit more. Now, again, I could have just painted yellow down here to start, but even as this dries, I start seeing some of this color just leaking through a little bit. And I like that. I mean, I could just take this image right here, take it to a photocopy place, get them to print it out, and it'll look exactly like that image. And I could make it as big as I want onto a poster. Any of you could do that right now. I think it's a 300 DPI PDF, so it'll look great printed a little bit larger. But I'm making a painting, and all these kind of questions as to how do I want the painting to look? Do I want it to look like a painting, or do I want it to look like it's like a page torn out of a comic book? Interesting questions, right? In fact, even this Bob Kane, obviously it's not in the original, it's in his sketch, so I think to myself right now, do I want this to be this color? I might paint it a different color. I might paint it the blue that we're going to do up here. Okay, speaking of which, let's clean our brush, and we're going to paint some blue in the background, in the sky. I see Gail has joined us. Hi, Gail, and she says coal, maybe. Coal, maybe. I'm not sure I know what that means. Like the department store Kohl's? Which is an American department store. Is that? It's been. Sometimes I have no idea. I don't even remember what I said 5 minutes ago. So sometimes people are commenting on things I said, and I'm like, what was that? What was I talking about? That's in reference to. Okay. So we'll do the blue. How do I do? Let's go blue. So to get this, we'll start with the baby blue that is underneath here. Actually, you know what, maybe we'll do the opposite. We'll start with this darker one, and then we're just going to add more white to brighten it up, right? Because it's always easier to do that. So let's, basically, and since this is a cool color that's in the background, we're just going to use our cool blue. If we paint that blue directly right there, it's going to be way too dark. It might not be too bad to have a dark blue like that, but I think it's just going to be too dark. So, and you know what, there's also a tiny bit, I would venture to say there's a tiny bit of actually this same yellow in there. It's got a bit of a, like, so for instance, if I just make this color here, it's pretty close. I'm going to steal some of this here and put it in here. So it's a little bit green. Let's put a little more blue back into it. It's not quite so green. I like that. So basically all I've done is I took white and cool blue, and then I added our previous mixture here, which was just warm yellow and white, right, in order to get this color on the background. And so what that's provided me is this color. It looks, I think I don't know if it looks exactly like this on camera, but to me it's actually a really nice blue. I haven't mixed this blue in a long time, but it has a bit of what would I say? It's got a bit of a teal color, but it's not as bright. If I put the cool yellow into here, it would be closer to a really lime, a phthalo kind of color, which is a really nice color too, but maybe a little bit too bright. So I'm going to take this color, and I just noticed, I didn't include that in the tracing, did I? Interesting. So I didn't include it in my tracing, but I am going to, I kind of like that look. So, I'm going to call a bit of an audible here. And I'm going to, maybe I should draw it out first. That would probably be smarter, right? Like do this kind of thing. There we go. And again, same sort of thing, the issue I had below of covering up my pencil lines. Actually, you know what? I am going to redraw. Because this is going to go, these bats will go black afterwards. It really covers up. So there's a lot of white in here. You can see the difference between adding a bit of water to that paint, right? How it really makes things way more transparent. Just painting the edge of the canvas now. Okay, so I have lost a bunch of those lines underneath. I'm not super concerned about that because I can, as I said, I can actually use my carbon paper after it's all dry and transfer the image back on top afterwards. Maybe I haven't done that in one of these episodes, so maybe I will do that. That could be a kind of a fun little something different. Okay, so we got that. I'm going to take this same color since I've already got it, and I'm just going to paint it elsewhere. So when I'm going to paint, these are those kind of those blue stripes, right? When I'm going to paint all that black later on. Now let's paint inside his cape. So I just want to make sure that these lines of the cape will match up, right? I'm going to paint black over top of there eventually, so again, I don't have to make it perfect. Like you can see, I'm painting with a big brush. I'm not doing any kind of fine detailing. Okay, and then while I've got this painting fresh on my brush, I look around. Anywhere else needs this paint? Oh yes, I see a few little tiny places. Right here on his pants. And then on his boots. And you can see, like, I'm just kind of painting it in almost a little bit sloppily, right? We're going to paint a lot of black over all those areas. And I did say that I was going to paint this the same blue, didn't I? So I might, yeah, remember I said I was going to put do a tracing back over top of this. I imagine some people who are just tuning in right now like, what is he doing? That's nowhere in that picture. Why are we painting a big blue square in the bottom? Ah. Okay. So that's good. I like where all of this is so... Oh, I forgot to paint that. Okay, well, I've still got some paint here. So there's always these little tiny details that I forget. Still have some of this paint. This is just warm yellow and white. Actually, I'm going to paint white, I think, over top of that whole thing. Okay, I'm going to hit this with the blow dryer, and then I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to do a second layer of the yellow here, and then we'll paint the other blue in the background. Ah, I see there in the chat, Gail writes, coal for black. Yes, when I was talking about CMYK. Thank you for right. Otherwise I'd just be sitting here thinking like, what am I losing my mind? What was I talking about? So I appreciate that. Thanks, Gail. Sorry for the confusion. Peter says, I just got in late. Finally, we are doing an artist I know. I'm not familiar with the works of Da Vinci or Emily Carr, but Bob Kane Batman, now we are in Peter territory. Oh, Peter, that's great. I appreciate that. Oh, come on. Why won't I can't. Heidi says, Peter, I was thinking this might have been your suggestion. And Peter says, I suggested Alex Ross Superman many months ago. I have no idea if that is actually doable. I thought it looked a bit like a girl with a pearl earring. But I knew that was one. That was for sure a painting. I do want to do an Alex Ross. Where's my? I'm a big Alex Ross fan. I've got lots of. Just so you know, Peter, I know who you're talking about. 1 second here. And so other people know who we're talking about. Here's some of the work of Alex Ross. So when people, this is a whole conversation we can have, because there's many people who don't consider comic books to be art, and which is a tragedy, because I think some of the greatest art of the past 100 years was made in the comic book genre. So these are all paintings, gouache, and I think primarily gouache is what he uses. And I mean, like, look at, like, these are, isn't that cool? Like, oh my goodness, that is super awesome. So this is the artwork of Alex Ross. So I do want to do an Alex Ross painting. It's definitely on my list of things to do. I think I can't remember where it is on the schedule. It isn't for a few months, just but we will get there eventually. Okay. Why does this? I'm just gonna paint. 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 I'm just this moon again. I almost feel like this moon should be even brighter. Oops, let's take that spotlight off. In which case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a bit of cool yellow. In fact, maybe I'm just going to mix this right off to the side here. I'm going to paint this over top. You know what, I like that. It is very subtle difference, but it's just a little bit more of a pop. And I would also guard against the desire you may have to make these colors really, really saturated, because when you put those black lines on there, it's going to make those colors look brighter than they actually are. That's one of the kind of the wondrous things about outlining with black, is it kind of separates everything into their own little spaces, just like a stained glass window. And whenever you have a color next to black, black is the darkest color, so it's going to make whatever's next to it appear lighter, right? So even if you have this kind of darker blue, put black right next to it, that blue is also going to look really, really light, right? So we'll get there. So I think it's kind of one of the fun, surprising things about working in this particular method. So have I got all my blue in? Before I mix a different color here, I want to see, okay, I got the blue up here, got the blue down here, on here, down there, I got blue, all the blue I want to use. I mean, obviously this wasn't too difficult to mix, but it's always worth just an extra little second. So we're going to mix a lighter blue. I'm actually going to mix this off to the side here. Might be a little bit light. Let's just... Okay. You saw that. So basically what this color is it's cool blue with white. And I also just scooped a little bit of this warm yellow and white in there as well. Just so it's not quite just pure blue, but it's got a little bit of extra spice in there, I guess. Okay. I'm going to use just a little bit of a smaller brush. Again, you could feel totally free to go over top of any lines, because all of this is going to be painted black anyway. But it's always easier to get it right the first time. And then you have less stress. Now with this, what I'm doing here, I'm not going to put a black line in between these two colors, which will be one of the few places I do that, or don't do that, I guess, depending on the way you think about it. So I do want this to be cleaner lines if possible. I might do 2 layers of this color. We'll see. what I'm doing right there is I'm just going, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving too much texture. Texture on its own is not necessarily a bad thing. I just, it's one of those things where if I want texture there, then I want it there. But if I don't want it there, I don't want it to surprise me. And sometimes you don't notice that until later on in the painting process. You're like, oh, there's some lines that are from previous layers that have made their way all the way through the process. So all of this, I'm just going to paint over. Okay. So now I've lost all of those pencil lines. Little bats and all that stuff. And I keep going over and changing the shape of this thing, which I've kind of invented. It wasn't, I didn't put it in my tracing. Okay. If I was thinking, if I was to work my way back, I probably could have painted this whole area this color blue and then just painted this blue over top of it afterwards. That might have been a little bit more efficient, but in a weird way, this type of a painting, you know, it may appear to be easier, but it also presents its own kind of challenges in different ways because of the fact that you know, it's a different kind of image making process that was used to create this image in the first place. So turning it into a painting, we have different options as to how we can approach it and how we can create it. So and sometimes those decisions, you know, are kind of, they're forks in the road. Which way do we want to go? Whereas if we're painting the Mona Lisa, we know how the Mona Lisa was painted, so it's just a matter of sort of painting it in a similar sort of a way, right? So I'm just thinking to myself, I may actually, I think I'm going to turn this square using the lighter blue after all. So I'm just going to paint this out. This, of course, is going to be where the Bob Kane signature is going to go. And now I'm looking up here and I'm thinking to myself, do I want to do another layer of this light blue, or can I kind of live with it like that? I think I'm okay with that. I don't mind that a little bit of kind of this color, this peachy, we were calling in newsprint, you know, foundational color comes through. I think it kind of makes things look a little bit unusual, so I kind of like that. Okay. So, what else should we do at this point? I am going to put the carbon paper, and we'll do all of this stuff in the background, I think, in a little bit. But before we get there, we need to do this. Need some gray, purple, and yellow. And I think that's all the colors that we need to put in here, right? Let's just wash these brushes up real quick. So this belt, I think I'm just going to use the same yellow that I've mixed already. I'm going to paint it in here, and then I'm going to do a brighter, more saturated yellow afterwards, after it dries. You know, okay, so let's mix the gray now. Now, obviously, we could. Do we want to just go the fast and dirty way of painting, taking white and black and mixing it together to make gray? We could do that, but I think you know that I'm probably more interested in showing how we can make gray without any other colors at all. So, since this is a class, or at least I want to impart some knowledge here, let's kind of learn a little bit about how we would do that, especially for people that are just joining us. So if I want to, actually, sorry, I'm going to back that out. After I just zoomed it in nicely, I'm going to back it out. So to make a gray, we basically want to use 4 of the 6 colors that we have here. And really doesn't matter too much which ones they are. The main thing you just want to be thinking to yourself is, what kind of a gray do I want to be making? Because there's lots of different kinds of grays. We have warm grays, we have cool grays, we have neutral grays. A neutral gray would be just mixing white and black together, and we're going to get a pretty, well, even that, because there are different kinds of white and different kinds of black, right? That's a whole other conversation. But for our purpose, we're painting a gray in the foreground figure. So we would want a warmer gray. So we're going to privilege the warmer colors on our palette to make that happen. So let's take some warm blue, take some warm red, and mix that together. We already see that's like basically a brown right there, nice dark brown. I mean, and some of you are like, why doesn't it go purple? That's episode number 2 of my How to Paint series. We talk about that. If I wanted a purple, I would take this warm blue and mix it with the cool red, and I would get a really, in fact, let's just do a tiny little mini detour here, right? We'll just take that same blue and some cool red. We mix this together and get a purple. All right? Obviously, if we mix more red into it, we'll get a little bit brighter purple. But that is a brown, right? Actually, we're going to use this purple for gloves, so we kind of already just mixed the two colors we're going to need. Okay, so anyway, we're going to mix a gray. So we want to mix a warm gray. So we take warm blue, warm red, we mix these together, and now we've got a kind of a brown. I'm going to also take, well, I could take, try to keep it on the cooler side. I'm going to put a little bit of warm yellow back into here. It's going to lighten it up a little bit. That warm red already has a bit of warm yellow in it. And let's take some cool blue and just add this in. So what that does at the very end is really just sucks that color right into the middle. So right now this looks like a really dark color, which is great. This would be a very, very dark brown amongst one of the darker colors that you can mix on your palette. And let's mix some white into this color. So we'll put some white down here. And if we just start mixing that white into the color we've got, you can see it goes a kind of a bit of a purpley color. If we want it to be less purpley, let's put a bit of yellow into it. Look at that, we've made our own gray. And again, this gray is a little bit on the warmer side. If I wanted to make a cool gray, I could take my cool blue, my cool red, my cool yellow, mix those together, maybe add a bit of warm blue or warm red, and I will get a gray, but it's going to be cooler. So let's paint this in here. And this would be a very different kind of gray than if we had just mixed black and white together. You could also, and one thing you could do is mix this kind of warm gray and also mix a mix it in with your neutral gray, a gray that's got black and white. If you wanted this effect, but something just a little bit more subtle. Okay. So as I painted in, and in fact I'll just zoom right in. When I was painting in, I just sort of clipped all the edges of the Batman logo on there, on his chest. And I'll touch that up when we get to it. Okay. And remember we mixed purple when I was doing that little demo. So that purple was our cool red and cool blue, and we've got this right here. I'm just going to use this right out my mixture that I did. You know, maybe I'm going to add a little bit of white to it because it's a little bit too dark. I know some people are like, oh no, now I've really lost all the details. Alright, so this will be good exercise on how to bring some of these details back. You know, if you wanted a way to do this would be to, at the very, very beginning, is just to paint all of your lines black. And then you could paint over all those lines and you'll still see some of them a lot easier than it would be to see your pencil lines, and then you could paint them a second time. That, depending on how you work, for me that would be more time consuming because I'm painting over the same black lines twice, and painting lines with black tends to be a slow process anyway, so that for me would be like a bit of a, would extend the painting time. But I can totally see for some people why that might be a desirable way of going about this. Okay, I think I've got all my colors in place. I want to make his belt a little bit more yellow. So I think that'll be the final thing. I'm going to take just some pure cool yellows, and we'll just paint that right here. And I could even let it, in fact, I think I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to paint that yellow again another time. You know, I'm gonna do, so I'll continue that thought. Let's just paint this even more yellow. Get nice and bright. That is tool belt here. And I think I'm also going to lighten up his face a bit. So we have this color. I still got lots of it left on my palette here. Do I have any white left? Here's a little bit of white. Let's just take a little bit of that color. That might be too white, but it'll dry a little bit as it goes. I also want to paint his eyes. and this is just pure white. Now there is in the sketch, you see how I made this kind of line of, what would you call it, like a cloud passing in front of the moon there. I think I want to recreate that in my painting as well. So what color? We could do it as like a glaze. There's lots of different ways that we could do that. Maybe let's do it as a white glaze, very subtle kind of shape going across here. And I'm not going to draw it with my pencil because then I'll see the pencil lines through here. This is going to be a really subtle effect. So I need to clean a few brushes here. So this is, it's one of these episodes that, the image itself appears quite simple, and then because it's simple, I think to myself, oh, well, we can go off the rails a little bit and improvise and be a little bit more playful and take some chances. Because really, you could, like, I could teach a version of this that, like, elementary kids could paint, right? But those of you that have been with me for 6 months or more, some of you have been with me for pretty much a year now, now that I think about it. Which, thank you very much. I can't believe you guys have donated so much of your lives to painting with me. For those of you who've been with me for a little while, you probably want a little bit maybe of a challenge, or maybe just to see, maybe you don't want to actually do it, but you're interested to see how it could be done if you wanted to play. So I've put some white here on my canvas, or my palette. I'm going to take some of my glazing fluid, right? This is satin glazing fluid. Satin, a synonym for satin would be matte, right? It's not glossy. So I'm going to do a matte or a satin glaze. I'm going to use white. We'll see how this works. This will be kind of a fun little detour here. So and it's also a little bit tricky because we have white, and then the glazing fluid is clear, and side by side it's a little bit hard to see how much. And you see I'm getting a bit of purple coming out. I didn't wash this brush clearly enough, but I don't mind that purple color. Famous last words, perhaps. We'll see. Let's see. That's a little bit too subtle, so let's get a little bit more white on our paintbrush here. Okay, I kind of like that. So let's see how this works. little bit wide here. Let's just keep it. So this is like a technique that would have been impossible for the printing process to duplicate, at least in this era. You know, comic books have evolved in, you know, to an incredible extent over the past 100 years, and the quality of printing has, you know, improved dramatically. So you can do some, you know, pretty incredible things that were even thought impossible just 10 years ago in terms of printing, and all sorts of really cool gradient effects. So do I want to do another one in his illustration? He's got another one coming in from below at a different angle. I don't know if I want to put another one in there. Do I? Let's just do it. Very subtle, except for that purple that's in my color. It's not really showing up at all, is it? In fact, you know what? I'm just gonna quickly erase that. Right? You get at it quick enough, it disappears. So I'm just gonna focus on this area up here. I'm gonna blow dry this, and we'll do another layer of glaze, and then we'll just put black over top of everything. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's take our glazing fluid. Just being kind of careful not to get too much white on there. So one thing, you know, some people would use water to achieve this same sort of effect. The thing with water, to do a glazing with water, is, first of all, it's really tricky. Water is actually going to make it dry faster. So you got to be really, like, you got to kind of plan your approach really carefully, so that you know exactly where pretty much every brushstroke is going to go before you start painting. It's a little bit less predictable because the water's, when it dries, it's going to change color pretty dramatically. I think that's good. Oh, you know what? And we've got this area down here. Let's do a reverse of this. Let's do the, we'll put the gray, do a gray glaze. So remember this gray that we mixed for his trousers down there? Let's take that, and let's do a glaze of that. So I'm just going to take that gray. In fact, I'm going to go, let's go a little bit wonky with, take a bit of purple and put it in here. Let's see how that works. Interesting. It's weird. You will find, like, when you paint in this process where we're doing everything and then we're going to outline everything at the very end, that it can be a little hard to imagine what it will all look like when we're all done. You kind of have to do it once, and then you go, oh, I see how everything kind of comes together. Now it makes sense. So I'm actually, right now, the reason why I'm going back over is I'm just kind of trying to take any brush strokes that were in here and removing those and just kind of spreading the paint out over and over again to thin it out a bit. I'm not sure. I don't know if purple is the best solution. Because it is kind of looks a little, yeah, we won't know. I mean, we can always change it too. There's no reason why this is the beginning and end all of this. It'll all evolve as we work on it. Okay, so blow dry one final time, and then we're just going to start painting all the black lines in. Okay, so I did say that I was going to use some carbon paper and re-transfer some things onto here. Now, it's impossible to match up this original image back to where it was, unless I had, I could possibly have found a way to tape it so that this could unfold and I could pull it back into its exact position. Even then, it's possible there could be a little bit of shifting and moving. If you've ever done printmaking or silk screening, which I used to, when I took silk screening classes when I was in college, there are these little tabs that you can put on the back of pieces of paper, and then little tabs that you tape onto a surface. And then you can then put the paper back in. You get like 99.99%, like the paper will be lined back up properly. But we didn't do that. I have those tools back here somewhere in a box. But so I would not want to try to put this in and then try to outline the black lines around here. It could turn into a complete and utter mess. But I could try to, if I'm not super concerned about getting everything to line back up into the exact same places, I could put this, like let's say this Bob Kane thing here. The best thing to do would be to cut this out. Let me just see if I can kind of line it up pretty close. I do have this pencil lines on the other side. Let's just see here. Let's use a different color this time so you can see what I'm up to. Like I say, this is, you can always just, you know, watch and see how poorly I do something before you decide whether you want to do it yourself. Once I start, I'm kind of committed to it. And let's see. It was kind of shifted off to the side a little bit in a way I'm not too happy with, but it's there, and you know, I'll make it work. I'll make it work. Okay, how about other places? Let me put some bats back up into the sky here. And you know what? I might even put some of these diagonal lines back in there. Okay, and there is another bat there, but I think I can see some of it showing through, so what have we got? Not bad. Okay, cool. So Peter says, I'm getting Batman this week, Star Wars next week, and I've been promised Alex Ross in the future. Things are coming up. Peter, I'll still do all the other artists I don't know. That's pretty funny. Okay. So now we've got the black lines to put in here. So I've got all this other paint. Now, it's possible if I do make any mistakes that I can go back and use some of this paint if it's not entirely dry by then. But we're going to focus on just using black for probably the next 45 minutes until we finish here. And so we'll take our time doing this. So I put some black on there. I find black always dries the fastest of all the colors. I don't know, I have nothing but my own experience telling me that. But that's just my... You could use a little bit of slow dry medium and mix that into your paint to slow down the drying time. I am going to use a tiny bit of it, but I do find that it thins the paint out ever so slightly, and sometimes because of that I end up having to go over top of those lines anyway. So I just mix a little bit into my paint here, which I'm going to do right now. So incorporating, that was maybe what, like 5 drops of slow dry medium. And then when I'm trying to get a nice sharp lines, I mix in here, and then I twist my paintbrush so that I can get a nice fine point. So where should we start here? Again, this is the sketch. Maybe let's start with the sky up here. I'll probably move around a bunch here. So, and since there's no bats in this one, let's go to my outline. Okay, maybe I'll zoom in so that you can see a little bit. So here's this other bat that kind of got covered up, but oops, let's move that down here. Sorry. Looks like, you know, he did some of these bats with like 3 spikes on either side, and this one's only got 2. Okay. all these diagonals, I think we'll come back to that since that's all wet up there. Why don't we come down to the bottom and just start putting in a bunch of these. Again, I'm going to start with all horizontal lines. Just like it's like an assembly line, and it's just easier if my hand is all going in the same direction rather than constantly switching back and forth. Oops, getting a bit of paint from my hand somewhere, so I'm going to have to wash my hand here in a second. Just clean that area up ever so slightly. That's okay. So when that happens, you know, if I'm starting to get paint on my hands that is starting to kind of go, it's worth just taking a second to clean your hands, potentially even go to the sink and wash your hands. If that's still, I wonder if I can get this glaze back in here. Just like that, like it was never there. Boom! Okay. Let's just keep on motoring. You know, I think a lot of people, what they do end up doing is they see what I'm doing right here as sort of an afterthought, and the main, most important thing is the, let's say, the face. And not just if we're painting Batman, but if we're painting anything that might have a face, whether it's a human or a dog. And that's a common, you know, it's a lot of people do that. But unless it's the only thing in their painting, often it ends up looking like people spend a lot of time on the face and very little time elsewhere. So one of my little personal tricks, or even like a trick I play on myself, is to do this, is to paint the background and put those details in first so that I'm less likely to, you know, wait till the very end and then just sort of rush through them and do it kind of a little bit sloppily and lazily. Because if I've done you know, I've put in some good time on here, then it's very hard to kind of be sloppy and lazy at the very end. So let's just see, how are we doing with these lines? So I wouldn't worry about getting these lines so-called perfect. I would just, you can see I'm kind of putting them in, and some places I go a little, you know, I'm not even really going over the lines to make them better or whatever. As I go and put more paint on this one here. Remember that I'm going a little bit wider because my canvas, the paper that I transferred didn't go all the way to the edges, so that's why I'm acknowledging the edge of the painting here by just having a few of these lines go off the edge. And maybe while I'm right here, let's outline the box. If you're doing, oops, you can't even see any of that, can you? If you're doing a lot of outlining, doing a lot of like thin, delicate lines like this, you may want to strongly consider getting a fluid acrylic. And I'll get some out here in a second to show you. Because they are kind of specially formulated for painting a little bit like thinner details, kind of exactly what we're doing right now. So in fact, let me see if I can find some. So I'll just show some of these here. There's a few different kinds. So here's fluid acrylics, and maybe you can hear that it's like a fluid, right? You can hear that it sounds like water as opposed to, you can't hear anything, right? The paint is much thicker. So this is what we would call like heavy body acrylic, right? And then you have soft body acrylic, right? And it is thinner, but not as thin as your fluid acrylics. And then if you want to go even thinner than that, you would go to, did I open the right bottom here? Okay, then you have here, we got high flow acrylics, which are even like thinner than that. And then lastly, the most thin of all, let me zoom out a bit here. The most thin of all would be acrylic inks. So you have, again, let's zoom out a little more. You have your heavy body acrylic, soft body acrylic, fluid acrylics, high flow acrylics, and an acrylic ink. And each one of these get thinner and thinner, like so. You can't hear anything. you kind of hear something. Much thinner. You hear that? In fact, this even has like a little cartridge in there to help keep it mixed. And then this is like water, right? It's super thin. So you could use a combination of any of these to help in this, to do this whole process. I'm going to stay with the materials that I think most of you are using. I'm not going to give myself a little cheat by using a totally different material. But I just want you to know that those tools exist out for you out there, that do make painting much more pleasurable. If you're finding doing this kind of thing like is driving you absolutely bonkers because you're finding it hard to kind of get the paint to the consistency you like, there are plenty of options that exist out there for you, and that are far superior than adding water to your paint. Because again, adding water to your paint is just making it more and more and more transparent. Which, if you want your paint to be transparent, that's great. But I would probably suspect most people just want their paint to go on easier, I think is how people would describe. Like, I don't like it, just feels too chunky and difficult, right? Well, using a different material that is specially formulated for that is the solution. Now, personally, I don't mind this look of the paint being a little bit, like not quite as clean as maybe some might hope it to be. Because I look at it and it to me is the hallmarks of a hand-painted image. And as I said near the beginning, you could just take the image right off the Dropbox and go and print it, and it's going to be, it's high enough resolution that I think you'll be happy with the result. So, you know, why paint it? If you want to, you know, I want to be able to see a bit of the hand of the artist in there. And as we've talked about, kind of a theme that's come up in some of the more recent classes is how do you find your own style? Honestly, one of the best ways to sort of inadvertently find your own style is it's how the shortcuts you take when you get frustrated or tired or bored, right? That's kind of how your own style kind of starts to leak out. Because you're like, I don't want to draw all these lines. How can I just fill this area in my own way? Like, or maybe I don't have a very steady hand. Or my eyes, I'm having trouble with my eyes, and doing all those lines is like, makes me feel uncomfortable. Right? Well, it's like there's lots of other solutions out there. Like, you could just paint this a solid color, and I'm sure it would be just fine. You could paint like just random kind of dashes and lines like that. There's, you should never feel like you can't do something. There's always a different kind of strategy that exists that would produce maybe a different result, but is not necessarily worse or bad, just different. Some people may find it easier to actually rotate the canvas to get at some of these diagonal lines rather than trying to paint them as I'm doing. This works relatively well for shorter lines. If I had to do a really long line, that would definitely turn my canvas for that for sure. So you see there's probably a lot more lines on there, but they've been covered up with my paint. So I kind of have to decide how many I want to actually put in here. I could be pretty happy with this as it is. Maybe I'm gonna put just a few more on here. I promise I'll move on. Okay. I'm going to do the Bob Kane signature here. You know, I was thinking, I know that there's plenty of people out there who are taking this class that really aren't interested in painting Batman, that would rather paint something else. And then there's people like Peter who are in heaven. What I would say is, if I was a kid and I found out my grandma or grandpa or mom or dad made a painting of Batman and maybe gave it to me for a birthday or Christmas or something, I would think they're a pretty cool person. So it's just a little hint to some people out there who are totally uninterested in today's artwork. Like, I would be so pumped if I had a painting by my grandma like this, especially if I was younger. Like, that would just blow my mind. So what I'm doing, I'm kind of going back and forth pretty much every time after I paint. I just taking a quick look and seeing, is there paint on my hand here? Because I often find this area and this area, I inadvertently always picking up paint, or even just it's getting dirty, you know, and especially if I've got a lighter area like this yellow here, I don't want all of a sudden to start getting discolored. And so okay, we're getting there, slowly, small steps. Interesting. I feel like this camera has tilted ever so slightly. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to give this a little shadow. This is kind of... Okay, let's march along here. Okay, so I think I'm going to blow dry all of this, and then I'm going to start working on the sky, and then I'm going to come down, and then we'll finish with Batman himself there. So it's a bit of a slower process, but we're getting there, mark by mark by mark, right? So I probably didn't need to blast it for that long, but because I have this, again, this white surface or yellow surface that's quite delicate, I really want to make sure that that was as dry as possible before I moved on. Okay. I would have been very happy doing this without any of these diagonal lines up here. I'm just going to roll up my sleeve. I think it will look kind of nice with them in here, so. So I find, like, after I've been using the brush for a while, I see how kind of this paint builds up there. I'm just going to take my cloth and just clean that off. In fact, I'm going to clean my brush right off. Right. As my paint has been sitting out for a while, I find I have to do that more and more and more and more. Now, so these diagonal lines, I drew them, but I'm going to change them so they're more in line with these ones here. And I'm going to put more of those lines maybe further up here. And you notice when I traced this, I didn't put every single line that was there onto the canvas. When I was a kid, I used to draw comic books with one of my best friend. He's still my best friend to this day. He was the best man at my wedding. And we did a comic book called Sliver, A Thorn in the Foot of Crime, about a kid in junior high school who was a part-time superhero, and his nemesis was his science teacher, who was based on our actual English teacher. And the story was that the Nazis had created an army of robots that looked like junior high school teachers, with the intent of spreading misinformation and dumbing down the population of North America to make their ultimate invasion easier, so there'd be less resistance. And I haven't thought about it until just as I talk about it, but geez, doesn't that seem like kind of how feels like the Trump years was a little bit like that. Anyway, what I was thinking about that is, well, obviously we're talking about comic books today. The way that we would make comic books is we would draw on pieces of paper that were 8.5 by 11, so your regular size pieces of photocopy paper here in North America at least. And then we would ink them, so we'd draw with pencil, and then we would ink them with black ink, often referred to as India ink. And get these like really beautiful pages, or just artworks in and of themselves, and then we would reduce them on the photocopier at Staples, or what did we use before Staples? Was it Staples? Were they around back then? I can't remember. I think we went to Staples. And then we would spend an evening stapling them all together. That was so satisfying, seeing the stacks of comic books being created. And then we would distribute them to comic book stores, which would sell our comics. We had our comics in stores all across North America. We were interviewed by the CBC, did a 10-minute long segment on us, which was a big deal when we were in high school. To be featured on television, like that was like the, basically felt like that was my 15 minutes of fame back then. Okay, let's back this out and see what we think. Oops, that's maybe a little far away. You know, I'm kind of ambivalent to how these lines in the sky look. I'm not sure that they are helping much. I don't mind them per se, but probably could have done without them. Okay, so I'll probably do a few more here, but I don't know exactly yet until this is obviously the center of the picture. We're going to need, you know, who knows what the picture is going to look like once the Batman is in here. It's going to be this big dark shape, so maybe I will want it to be a little bit lighter in the corners. I don't know. We don't know yet, so before I commit myself to that, I'm gonna paint the rest of the picture, right? So this is why having a smooth surface to paint on is highly desirable. It makes painting so much easier and more pleasurable because you're not having to dip your paintbrush into the paint as often, and you don't have to go over your lines as often either. going to bump up to a bit of a larger brush for some of this stuff in here. So this is where I'm gonna use the rest of my black paint that I have on kind of these big wide areas, and then I'm gonna squeeze some new fresh black paint out onto my palette because it's starting to get a little chunky and hard to paint with, and it gets kind of, it's just a little bit frustrating. So, and who wants to have a frustrating experience? No one wants to deliberately make their lives miserable, so we will, you know, switch out the paint and get some fresh paint on here. Okay. You could draw your pencil lines. In fact, that's probably, maybe I'll do that just to show people. I'll do that in a second here as I get paint a little bit more of this black in. Because people might find it a little tricky, because I'm kind of maybe making it look either really easy or more difficult than it is. I've obviously had many years of experience doing this kind of thing, so maybe I'm just used to it, but I can totally see how this could, if you don't have any lines, because we've painted over all the lines with several layers of paint, how it could be a little bit difficult. So let's just use up all of this black paint that I have on here on this side of the cape, and then I'll show you what I mean. Okay. Now if we look at, there's the original, so you can see how we're getting all these lines in there. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to clean off these brushes. The paint is really, you know, kind of building up on them. So let's just, I'm going to put these in here, let them soak for a second. And while that's soaking, I'm going to take a look here and just try to draw some of these lines back in, which will probably make my life easier. As long as I can get my head out of the way. I mean, some of this is kind of self-explanatory, I guess. But it does help, for sure. Because I do find sometimes when I'm painting, I kind of just get into a mode, and I don't really realize what I'm doing until I've done it. And then it's like, whoa, okay. Right, even almost just putting the pencil lines over top of there really help. Okay. Let's So I mean, like little places here where I'm going to probably take the brush and go a little bit closer and over top of that line. So it's kind of like, I'm not worried about making it all perfect the first time around. Oh, once that utility belt comes into focus, it all starts to feel like we're closer and closer to the end. I'll probably go back afterwards and clean up things, add little bits of details where I haven't yet. I'll save this until I got everything else in. I don't want to do the boots. I'm going to do that a little bit afterwards. Got a kind of a quiet chat tonight after it was that flurry of activity at the beginning, and then much quieter. I think it's usually what happens is I think a lot of people start and then they decide to begin and end at a different date. The vast majority of people who paint along paint afterwards, after the class has been recorded. So, which is great. However people want to do it, it's I think works well. Okay, so let's get this. So I'm going to carry this line over here. same sort of thing. I'm going to go up and over here. I would be really interested to know what other kind of comics or pop culture images people would be interested in painting. We are going to do a Superman image for Superman Day. Can't remember when that is. Do I have it on Superman Day or a different day? I might be doing it during July. I'm going to focus almost entirely on Canadian artists since July 1st is Canada Day. I'm going to spend most of July just focusing on Canadiana stuff. So that's where we'll get our Tom Thompsons, Group of Sevens, and all that kind of stuff. Cornelius Craighoff, Paul Kane, Alexander Colville, we'll get them all in July. Okay, so I want to be done in about 25 minutes or so, just in case you're playing along. And I think that's achievable. Gail is signing off. Good night, Gail. Thank you for joining us for the live stream. If I was using like fluid acrylics, it would actually make my life a lot easier. I would be able to paint this image much faster. But as I said, I want to show people that you can do any image from the Mona Lisa to Batman with the basic art supplies that you can get at any art supply store anywhere on Earth. I mean, obviously I showed you those supplies, I have them. Maybe I'll do an episode where I kind of focus, I'll use them and kind of explain how they're used, and maybe we'll do it on the Superman one. Let's see. What's funny to me is I still haven't gotten my new audio set up. So you're just hearing the audio from the overhead camera, which is attached to the ceiling. So if you're wondering what all that thumping is, that is our daughter running around. Personally, it brings me a tremendous amount of joy, so I have not particularly inclined to do much about it. So what's interesting is, you know, if we think back again to earlier, you know, when we were painting these colors, some of these colors looked kind of ugly side by side. We have to remember, they're not really side by side. You know, there's the black that is dividing and separating them. And what's great about that is all of a sudden it starts to make sense. Like, these colors, I think, just are really singing together very nicely. If we look at the original, we're pretty close. We're pretty close to all of those colors, right? You know, I think maybe earlier when I was painting it, I mean, I have enough experience to know, but I think maybe some people would have thought this gray was a little bit too purpley. But I could already tell because I wanted a warmer color anyway, and the color on the left is a little bit warm, that it would work. But anyway, let's do these boots. The boots. Wider, more muscular calves there. You know, one little brush stroke and all of a sudden he looks like he works out, right? That he's a little more muscular of a dude. So the reason why I waited until this point to kind of come back and fill things in is I find it's a little distracting when there's so much unfinished areas that now as it's getting clearer and cleaner towards the end, I can kind of have a bigger, I can see the whole picture and how all this fits together a little bit more clearly. That boot is pretty wide down there. I don't want it quite as wide, but to fix it would be a bit of a pain, so I'm actually going to widen the other leg. A little bit. Okay, I think I'm gonna use the air dryer, blow dry this, and then I'm gonna come up to the head here. And I'm just, also before I do that, I want to get rid of any large lumpy texture parts which I see kind of here. Okay. That's cool. I don't think I'll need a big black brush anymore. Okay, coming into the home stretch here. We should be done in about 10 minutes or so. 10-15. Although every time I say that, I do something stupid and I end up being here for another hour. But we'll, I got bath time coming up, so I have to move. Okay. Maybe before I do that, let's do a few more. I'm actually going to draw these lines out for myself. Sometimes the only way to make something look like, I'm not too happy with those lines I put up there, but I put them up there and I'm not going to go and paint them out, especially at this point. So in order to make them look better, I think I need to put more of them, just to kind of make it all seem like part of the plan, right? It's like I love that whole idea of improvisational jazz. How, you know, if you make a mistake, just repeat the mistake and then people think you did it intentionally. And it's true, you know, most of my friends are musicians. And I can't tell you how many times, like after a show, I'll come up and say, wow, that was amazing. And they'll be like, but you know, that time, didn't you notice, like, I totally flubbed that one song? And I'm like, what? When was that? Oh, it was the second verse. I played a E instead of G, and I'm like, oh, I had no idea until you mentioned it. So I often think, if you make a mistake, just keep going forward. Try to find a way to make it work. As Tim Gunn from Project Runway is known to say. So another example would be if you made a mistake and you dripped paint onto the canvas, you know, rather than trying to fix it by painting the canvas, it might be to actually try to drip more paint on there. As a way of making it look like the drips were intentional. I'm not happy with where I put that brush stroke, but another one here to kind of try to integrate them. Yeah, I don't know, painting might have looked actually better without all of that extra work that I just put into it. But sometimes you just never know until you do it, so let's do this moon. And then finally onto the face here. One thing I love about this particular Batman is his ears. How they look more like actual bat ears, and how I don't know, also the mask too, like how it kind of points quite far down towards his nose, whereas the other subsequent Batmans, it kind of just goes straight across. I've always just loved this particular look, and I've heard the new Batman reboot that they're doing with Robert Pattinson, I don't know when that comes out, will be kind of going back to the original Batman, this version of Batman, apparently. So that'll be interesting to see how they do that. Gave him a bit of a goatee there with that little dot there, didn't I? Okay, so I think we're pretty much done. I guess things that I think about is, do we want to add any of these little details like on the arms and legs based on his sketch? Or do we want to kind of keep it relatively simple and clean? Let's zoom back out. I guess there's a few things. There's another line there. I think I'm going to keep that out. I don't think I need to paint it. Not much room for it. There's often these things that I can't see because of the lights of the studio here, and then when I look at it later on, I'm like, oh no! Okay. I was just thinking to myself, is there a way, should we acknowledge Bill Finger in here? So I think what I want to do is, I just want to see if I can find Bill Finger's signature. So I'm just trying to see. Is that Bill Finger's signature here? Huh, so that's Bill Finger's signature. It's Williams Finger. Okay. So let me show you how I would go about replicating this. I think I'm going to put that in the painting here. Come on. Like Bob Kane and Bill Finger. So to do that, I'm going to get just a different piece of paper. Do I have any? I have some scraps over here. So we're going to do a little bit of counterfeiting here. So, do we want to do W? What if we do... I just don't... That looks... I guess that could be willing finger. Okay, so let's go start something a little bit smaller. That's going to be way too big. All right, so we're going to do it again, a little bit smaller. I don't know about that, guys. I want something a little bit cleaner that we can actually read his... Oh, there's a Bill Finger. Okay. Okay. So, let's see if I can make this fit. So I'm just going to cut this out. Okay, so, oops. I should have thought about this when I was putting down that. Should have left this space. I was even thinking about it while I was painting it. Yum, 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 yum. All of that paint is hardened. I think, if I recall, wasn't it just white and warm yellow? So that paintbrush is dirty. Let's try that again. More yellow in it. So to sort of lightening that area up, let's blast it with some air to dry it, and then maybe we could paint it with a different color. Okay, what color should we use? Let's mix real quickly a purple. Just since we've got purple elsewhere in the picture, I think a little bit of this purple I think will look kind of nice. Okay. And then let's pull up his signature again here. Now, obviously, I'm got my own weird version of it that I've created. You know, it's actually a pretty tragic story what ended up happening to Bill Finger. He died, broke alone. His family and everything fell apart. He died essentially forgotten. It wasn't until, like, he died in, I think, 1974, if I'm correct. After kind of battling Bob Kane for decades over some financial compensation which never came to him. I believe that Batman, the comic books now acknowledge him in the comics at the beginning. I think it was like co-created, or Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger, I think is how they credit him. This makes me feel very happy to put this little bit in here at the end. Okay, so there we go. Let's just take one. Well, let's autograph it, just as we did. Falsified a couple signatures there already. Okay, so my name. Try to remember it. There we go. Let's see the original side by side here. Cool. That's great. That makes me pretty happy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of another episode. If you found today's painting session helpful, interesting, I would love it if you were to like and subscribe to the channel. Many of you already are, but about half the people who watch this don't like and don't subscribe. So the more people that are liking, subscribing, the easier it is for me to find new viewers and really spread the message of how important it is for everybody to be expressing themselves creatively and positively, as opposed to some of the negative ways that we can let out our emotions and thoughts, right? Especially in today's polarized world, art is a great way to just slow down a little bit, look a little bit more carefully, appreciate people from different cultures and different periods of time, different genders and races, etc., right? So I would very much appreciate that. If you want to leave a small or large donation, there's a PayPal link down below. Please join the Facebook group and upload your version of today's painting. On next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we're going to paint a Ralph McQuarrie painting of Star Wars, the climactic battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader from The Empire Strikes Back, an illustration that Ralph McQuarrie did to help inspire the filmmakers and George Lucas as to what that would actually ultimately look like. And they basically did exactly what he painted. Right, so he's responsible for envisioning the look and feel of that film, which I think is just remarkable. And then next Sunday we're going to do a feedback episode. So not this week. I did mention this Sunday, but it'll be, or Saturday, but it'll be the following week afterwards. So I look forward to looking at your work and giving you feedback on it and how they can possibly be better. Although, from what I've seen already, you guys are doing an amazing job. In some instances, better than I am. Which is the goal, I think, of any teacher, is to have your students exceed you, that they can see what you're doing and then ultimately improve upon it. And boy, oh boy, you guys are doing a great job at that. And maybe it's not too hard to exceed me either. So, anyway, thank you very much, everybody. And I look forward, yes, as Deborah says, May the 4th be with you. That's when we shall see you again on May the 4th. Okay, so enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you next week. Yeah, do I have anything else I want to say? I don't think so. I don't think anybody wants to hear me say anything else anyway. Well, have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you very, very soon.